Before we begin, this story is based on real events that took place in 2016 in the Moscow suburb town of Ozyory. This is one of the most tragic cases of child abuse in modern Russia. All the facts you will hear are taken from court case materials, witness testimonies, and publications in official media, Lenta.ru, Moskovsky Komsomolets, Vesti TV channel, materials from the main investigation department of the Investigative Committee of Russia for the Moscow region. This video contains descriptions of child abuse. If you are not ready for emotionally difficult content, please do not watch further. We treat the memory of Veronika Chernikova with deep respect. Our goal is not to shock, but to tell the truth about how systemic failures and indifference can lead to tragedy. So, let's begin. On August 6, 2016, in the town of Ozyory in the Moscow region, an event occurred that shook the entire region. A 6-year-old girl, Veronika Chernikova, disappeared from her home. 200 local residents joined the search. Volunteers from the Lisa Alert team. Rescuers combed the surrounding forests on quad bikes. Helicopters were raised on alert. Missing person flyers with the girl's photo appeared on all highways within a radius of 100 kilometers. For 3 days, Ozori lived with one hope: to find Veronika alive. But on August 11th, investigators detained the girl's adoptive parents, and something terrible was revealed. Veronika had not been alive for 4 months already. She was killed by her adoptive father, and her mother and grandmother helped conceal the crime. For 126 days, the family lived as if nothing had happened. They continued receiving benefits for a dead child. They reported to the kindergarten about their daughter's illnesses, and only when they learned about an upcoming inspection by Child Protective Services did they stage a disappearance. This is a story about how indifference kills, about how the child protection system failed, and about how little Veronika cried out for help, but no one heard her. The town of Ozori. Ozori is a small town in the Moscow region. Population just over 20,000 people. Distance to Moscow, 120 kilometers. A former workers' settlement where several industrial enterprises still operate today. The town is quiet, provincial. Everyone knows each other here. Neighbors greet each other. Children play in the yards. Crimes happen rarely. That's precisely why the disappearance of a 6-year-old girl became such a shock. For Ozyory, the memorial action for Veronika, when thousands of people came out to the central square and released white balloons into the sky, became the most massive event in the town's entire history. But let's take it from the beginning. The Chernikov family. Roman and Tatiana, the beginning. Roman Chernikov and Tatiana Zubareva met in 2003. Roman was 20 years old, Tatiana was 19. For Roman, this was his second marriage. From his first marriage, he already had a child, a boy. They got married in 2004. After the wedding, the young family began renting housing. Roman didn't have his own place, and they didn't want to live in the private house of Tatiana's parents, the Zubarevs. Roman worked at various enterprises. The lion's share of money went toward paying rent. The family unsuccessfully tried to conceive a child. Several years of attempts, medical examinations, disappointments. And this resulted in constant reproaches from Roman. In the winter of 2006, an incident occurred. Elena Zubareva, Tatiana's mother, came to their rented apartment, and she saw that her daughter's wrists were cut. And Roman was standing nearby, reproaching her for infertility. He didn't even try to provide first aid. He clearly smelled of alcohol, and when he drinks, he becomes very aggressive. Elena Zubareva later told investigators. I called the police then, and they took Roman to the station. I bandaged my daughter's wrists myself. We didn't want what happened to become known. Shortly after this, they decided to adopt a child. The first adoption. At the end of 2007, the Chernikovs adopted their first child, a boy, very small. The adoption process went quickly and without problems. Here it's worth making an important digression. Elena Zubareva, Tatiana's mother, had worked for 2 decades as a nurse at the local orphanage. She knew many details about abandoned children that should not have become known to adopters. She had friendly relations with the directors of both the orphanage itself and the guardianship and custody department. She understood perfectly well what payments adopters were entitled to, and the money question in Roman and Tatiana's family was always pressing. An investigation subsequently revealed no direct abuses in the adoption process, but many details point precisely to this idea. For example, despite the strictly protected legal secrecy of adoption, all close acquaintances of the family knew that the children were adopted. Elena Zubareva openly talked about this, stopping to chat with the head of the local guardianship department right on the street. The boy turned out to be a calm and reasonable child. Encouraged by this experience, the Chernikovs decided to adopt a second child, Veronika. Adoption. In the fall of 2010, the Chernikovs chose a girl from one of the orphanages. Her name was Polina. She was born on May 2, 2010. She became the 11th child of a woman who abused alcohol and suffered from syphilis. The mother abandoned the girl at the maternity hospital. Shortly after birth, the baby was taken to an orphanage, and in the fall of 2010, she was adopted by Tatiana and Roman Chernikov. By court decision, the child's data was completely changed. Polina became Veronika Romanovna Chernikova. While still at the orphanage, Veronika was diagnosed with a heart defect. Formally, she was considered seriously ill. But when the baby moved to her new parents, an examination conducted by the family showed she had no heart defect. The syphilis was completely cured. The girl's adoption process was nearing completion. The case had already entered court for a final decision, and it was then, in September 2010, that Tatiana Chernikova shared joyful news with her husband and parents. After 6 years of trying, she had finally become pregnant. In October 2010, the court issued a decision on Veronika's adoption, and in March 2011, the Chernikovs had their own daughter, Polina, who became formally the third, but actually the first child in the family. The turning point. All witnesses, including Tatiana's mother, the children's grandmother, Elena Zubareva, claim the same thing. From the moment their biological daughter was born, the adopted child became unwanted by the Chernikovs. This is visible even in the photographs, says Captain of Justice Sergei Stroitev, investigator of especially important cases at the main investigation department of the Investigative Committee of Russia for the Moscow region. The biological daughter is well-groomed, well-dressed. She has beautiful earrings in her ears, but the second girl's clothes are worn, untidy, no jewelry. The biological daughter sleeps on clean and new bedding. The second girl sleeps on faded and visibly dirty sheets. Even in the photographs from the crime scene inspection, you can unmistakably determine which bed the biological daughter slept in and which the adopted children slept in. Meanwhile, each accused person during the investigation tried to exaggerate the shortcomings of their victim. The Chernikovs attributed a tendency to steal to Veronika, called her mentally unstable, disobedient. They claimed she was regularly examined by a psychiatrist and even named diagnoses: autism and schizophrenia. Although formally, a diagnosis of autism can only be made after age 7. What did the teachers say? According to kindergarten teachers' assessments, Veronika was an open, sociable child, very active, without any physical or psychological deviations. At age 2, she dressed and ate independently. Her speech was well developed, even beyond her years. No one ever complained that she stole anything. She had no serious conflicts or fights with other children. No deviations were observed in the child during her time attending kindergarten. The girl developed according to her age. Self-care skills were formed, the case materials state. And Veronika gravitated more toward adults. And it was noticeable that at home, she lacked normal communication. Life in the Chernikov family. The Chernikovs' house is located in a private sector on the outskirts of town. Finished outside with siding, but it seems to lean to the right side. The yard has grass waist-high. Neighbors tell, the Chernikovs drank frequently. Both Roman himself, his wife Tatiana, and mother-in-law Elena. She died from the white lightning, but that was several years ago, neighbors say about her. They didn't really communicate with anyone. Even when drinking in their yard, in the gazebo, always just the three of them. They never saw guests at their place. Roman, when drunk, was violent. There was an incident. The man attacked a neighbor's goat. Didn't like that the animal was hanging around his fence. He grabbed it by the horns and almost ripped them out with the roots. The frightened goat and the grandmother who rushed to help barely fought him off. Although usually he just chased his drunk family members with choice profanity. The whole neighborhood heard. But nobody ever called the police, understandably. Normal stuff. He's not the only one like that, neighbors say. At the same time, nobody could call Roman and his family marginals. Normal family, they say. Roman even worked sometimes. Sometimes he'd go to Stupino to a car wash. Sometimes to Domodedovo. Sometimes he'd help assemble refrigerators at the local Ozyory factory. But he never stayed anywhere long. And in June 2016, he and his wife decided to open a small business, a fast food stand on Central Lenin Street. Veronika in kindergarten. Kindergarten number 2. Delfinchik. At first, Veronika was taken to a kindergarten that was very close to home. Then the parents transferred the girl to another kindergarten almost 2 years later, in January 2015. In June 2015, Veronika came to kindergarten number 2, Delfinchik. But the girl attended here for less than 2 weeks. The mother wrote a statement that the girl would be temporarily absent due to family circumstances. At the same time, Tatiana Chernikova continued taking her younger daughter to kindergarten. Apparently, they isolated Nastya from communicating with outsiders so she wouldn't accidentally say something about her sister. What the teachers saw. From the moment Veronika started attending kindergarten, I began noticing that the girl was often untidily dressed. Her clothes were generally unwashed. The child emitted an unpleasant odor from a personal hygiene standpoint, one of the nannies told investigators. I talked many times with her mother, Tatiana Chernikova, about this. I said I'd collected Veronika's dirty things that needed washing. Tatiana reacted adequately to the comments, washed the clothes. However, then everything returned to its original state. But most importantly, the teachers saw bruises on the girl's body. Twice they reported this to the local guardianship authorities. They passed information to Olga Olenina, head of the guardianship and custody department of Ozyory. Once, they even passed along an audio recording of a conversation with Veronika, who told in detail how and with what her father beat her. How he tied her to the ladder of the bunk bed, forcing her to urinate while standing into a basin placed on the floor. This is what little Nika said. Papa punished me. He tied my hand to the bed ladder and wouldn't let me go anywhere. And when I needed to pee, he brought a basin and told me to pee in it. I took a candy from the table, and Papa saw, put a cake on the floor, and said I should eat like a cat. I was crying, and he picked up a belt and started yelling at me. This recording was passed to the guardianship authorities. What did Olga Olenina do? Nothing. The system that failed Olga Olenina was a longtime friend of Elena Zubareva, the children's grandmother. They had known each other since 1995. Annually, guardianship and custody authorities are required to inspect adoptive families and compile corresponding reports. These should indicate what psychological state was recorded on the day of inspection for the child, how they're dressed, what conditions they live in, how they're characterized. Photographs are mandatory attachments to the inspection materials. For 6 years, Olga Olenina never once came personally for a scheduled inspection of the adopted children, and photographs were sent to her by the relatives of the adopted children. Twice, in spring 2014 and in January 2015, her old friend Elena Zubareva, the children's grandmother, approached her. She presented specific facts of cruel treatment of Nika. But both times Olenina didn't accept written statements. She came for inspections based on oral reports herself, but didn't compose any paperwork and gave no follow-up to this information. Olenina spent no more than 5 to 10 minutes on inspections. She didn't even examine the girl herself, didn't check her toys, and twice more, kindergarten teachers reported bruises on Veronika's body to her. Moreover, once they even passed along that very audio recording of the conversation with the girl. I personally never once saw the Chernikovs drunk, although I've known the family since 2007. I received no complaints of this kind, Olga Olenina stated during interrogation. Although the case materials already contained protocols in which both kindergarten staff and Chernikov relatives, appearing as witnesses in the case, claim they reported repeatedly, and Olenina promised to take all measures, but did nothing. The crime. April 1st, 2016. April 1st, 2016. Exactly 1 month before Veronika's 6th birthday. A feast at the Chernikovs' house. Roman is in a state of alcohol intoxication. Shashlik on the table. According to the investigation's version, confirmed by the court, Roman became outraged when he saw that Veronika grabbed a piece of meat from the table without permission. He grabbed the girl by the head and shook her violently. According to his words, the daughter choked on a piece of meat and began suffocating. Trying to resuscitate the child, he hit her on the cheeks. However, this didn't help. Veronika died. Roman Chernikov never fully admitted his guilt. At trial, he insisted on the version of an accident. He claimed that his daughter accidentally suffocated, and he and his wife simply feared the consequences. But the investigation didn't believe this version. First, forensic examinations showed, on Veronika's personal belongings, in the house and in the shed, numerous dried drops of brown color were found, which turned out to be blood. Second, it was established, Roman systematically beat the girl. Testimonies from neighbors, teachers, audio recordings of Veronika's own stories, all this indicated that on April 1st, not an accident occurred, but murder as a result of cruel treatment. The court found Roman Chernikov guilty of taking the life of a knowingly underage adopted daughter and improper fulfillment of obligations for raising a child, combined with cruel treatment. Concealing the crime. Fearing the consequences, Roman persuaded his wife and mother-in-law to conceal the girl's death. They decided to dispose of the body. According to the accused's own testimony, they dismembered the girl's body. This took them a whole day. Then, they burned the remains. The Chernikovs scattered the girl's ashes in 4 settlements of the Moscow suburbs. During a verification of testimony at the scene, the girl's adoptive mother, Tatiana, confirmed her husband's testimony, indicating the settlements and showing the places where they scattered the child's remains. Similar testimony was given by grandmother Elena Zubareva. Forensic specialists discovered numerous dried drops of brown color in the suspect's house and in the shed, which were blood. Samples were sent for examination. Veronika's body was never found, but the court deemed the evidence sufficient for sentencing. 126 days of silence. After April 1st, 2016, the Chernikov family lived as if nothing had happened. They continued receiving benefits for Veronika. Tatiana regularly called the kindergarten and reported on her daughter's illnesses. She promised that by September, the girl would definitely recover. Runny nose, cough, that sort of thing, so we didn't raise any particular alarm, says the deputy head of educational and methodological work at kindergarten number 2 in Ozyory. Maxim, the older adopted son, and 5-year-old Nastya, the biological daughter, were strictly forbidden to say that their sister had disappeared. For authenticity, for several days they taught the children in a playful manner to tell stories about Nika, that their daughter had disappeared. 2 weeks ago, at the end of July, in honor of opening the family cafe, Tatiana Chernikova gave an interview to the local newspaper. The conversation included talk about the children. 6-year-old Veronika had already been dead for 4 months at that point. Do you have any tricks in raising children that you could share with parents? The journalist asked. There's no better and simpler advice than simply understanding their desires and, most importantly, loving your children. If you do this, then no tricks will be needed, Tatiana answered. The staged disappearance. August 6th, missing person report. The Chernikovs knew, any day now Child Protective Services employees should come to their home, a scheduled inspection, annual. And only then did they decide to report that their daughter had disappeared. On August 6th, 2016, the girl's adoptive father noticed his daughter's disappearance. After searching for her in the yard, he went further. Roma went to the neighbors. "Have you seen her?" a neighbor recounts. Everyone shrugged, but it was strange. The children never left the yard all day long. The head of the family ran to write a statement to the police. The search. Soon, search and rescue workers from the Liza Alert team appeared at the house. Volunteers went through the streets with flyers, showing passers-by photos of Veronika. Nothing. The search workers were the first to suspect something was wrong with this story. Chernikov participated in the search only on the first day, a volunteer recounts. Then he just went about his business in the yard, washing his car. He showed no outward signs of concern. He wasn't interested in how the search was going, and when search workers came to clarify something, he got angry. At some point, he even hung a note on the gate, "Leave us alone." After the sad denouement, it became clear. This indifference was not accidental. Chernikov's mother-in-law, Elena Zubareva, even gave interviews to journalists, telling a made-up story about the girl's disappearance from the yard. The girl's grandmother invented a version of why Veronika might have run away. She tells Pasha, "If you don't take me to the celebration, you won't have a celebration. She's such a vindictive girl, ours." That's what kind of celebration she arranged for everyone. Such behavior from a family that wasn't at all interested and didn't participate in searching for their adopted daughter outraged law enforcement. Suspicions. All night long, the Chernikovs, operative officers, and volunteers they'd enlisted searched for supposedly runaway Nika. In the morning, a criminal case was opened. Divers searched the bottom of the nearby fire pond. Volunteers combed the neighboring forest. Police reviewed video surveillance footage on the highway. And in Kolumna, they detained a suspicious man who supposedly was interested in little girls. But then social media played its role. One of the medical workers at a rehabilitation center recognized Nika in the photograph and wrote that the girl was adopted, and that, most importantly, she could have been a victim of domestic violence. Only then was it revealed that the girl was regularly beaten by her papa, and that teachers had seen bruises. For unknown reasons, this information hadn't reached the police earlier. Investigators decided, all this is very suspicious. The family is hiding where the girl is. Arrest and confession. August 11th, detention. On August 11th, 3 days after the missing person report, investigators detained both Chernikovs. They disappeared on the second day of searches, turned off their phones. Investigators found the married couple in the neighboring village of Serebryannya Prudi, hiding on cemetery grounds. They say both were drunk and initially said something incoherent. Along with the spouses, they also detained Tatiana's mother, the children's grandmother, Elena Zubareva. The grandmother also knew about the granddaughter's death, but remained silent. Confession. For a long time, both claimed that their daughter had simply left without permission. They were convinced, no body, no case. But the investigation strongly doubted this version and collected facts piece by piece. They quickly managed to establish the Chernikovs are lying. Cornered, they confessed. That's when it became clear that more than 4 months had passed since Veronika's death. True, they claimed that Nika died as a result of an accident, and they, frightened, simply hid the body. During interrogation, the adoptive parents told the investigator that back in April 2016, the girl supposedly drowned in the bathtub. Having discovered this and being frightened, the parents decided to conceal her body. To this end, They burned it in a bonfire. But investigator captain of justice Sergei Stroitelev, step by step, managed to break down this version too, establishing the true circumstances of little Nika's death. Evidence. The investigation did colossal work. Despite the absence of Nika's body, they managed to collect objective evidence of prolonged torment of the girl, including finding audio recordings of her stories about how she was beaten, discovering the girl's personal belongings with blood traces, collecting data about systematic and very cruel punishments. More than 30 forensic examinations were conducted. 100 witnesses were interrogated. Each of them said something important. Investigator Stroitelev managed piece by piece to reconstruct almost all of little Nika's life. The court, having studied all materials, deemed each piece of evidence individually and everything in complex convincing. The trial and sentence. The trial process. The trial of the adoptive daughter's torturers began in January 2016 and proceeded in a closed-to-press regime. At the first court session, it was announced that the girl's grandmother, Elena Zubareva, was not involved in the reprisal against her granddaughter. Therefore, no charges were brought against her. However, it's worth noting, Zubareva not only knew about the crime committed, but also concealed it for 5 months. And during the 3-day search in Ozyory for Veronika, she deliberately gave false information. Roman Chernikov refused a jury trial. He was convinced, no body, no case. He hoped for leniency from professional lawyers. The sentence. On June 15, 2018, the Moscow Regional Court issued a sentence. Roman Chernikov was sentenced to 17 years, 6 months of imprisonment in a strict regime colony with restriction of freedom for 1 year. Charges: taking the life of a knowingly underage adopted daughter, improper fulfillment of obligations for raising a child combined with cruel treatment, torture. Tatiana Chernikova, for the same crimes, except for taking a life, was sentenced to 5 years, 6 months of imprisonment in a general regime colony. In addition, 36,000 rubles were collected from her for the federal budget. From her husband, 54,000 rubles. The Moscow Region Prosecutor's Office asked the court to sentence Roman Chernikov to 22 years in a strict regime colony and his wife to 7 years. However, the court decided to slightly reduce the sentences due to mitigating circumstances. Olga Olenina. Notice. The Moscow Region Main Office of the Investigative Committee of Russia opened a criminal case for negligence against Olga Olenina, head of the guardianship department of Ozyory, and sent it to court. By sentence of the Ozyory City Court, the head of the Department for Placement of Children left without parental care was assigned punishment in the form of 2 years imprisonment, suspended, reported senior assistant to the head of the main investigation department of the Investigative Committee of Russia for the Moscow region, Olga Vrady. The woman was fired even after the criminal case was opened. Society's reaction. Helmet, bulletproof vest, and reinforced convoy. After the town's residents learned how 6-year-old Veronika died, the crowd can barely be restrained. "Such people should be immediately executed," people shout. "Poor baby, don't imprison them, execute them. Right in front of everyone, execute them. These aren't people anymore, they're animals." On Wednesday evening, when the terrible details of what happened in Ozyory became known, thousands of people came out to the town's central square. In memory of the dead girl, they released white balloons into the sky. For Ozyory, a former worker settlement where several industrial enterprises are still located, this action became probably the most massive in all its history. To the house where the girl lived, people still bring toys. Conclusion. Where are they now? Roman Chernikov is serving his sentence in a strict regime colony. His term is 17 years, 6 months. He was arrested in 2016. This means he will be released presumably in 2033 or 2034. He will be about 53 years old. Tatiana Chernikova was sentenced to 5 years, 6 months of imprisonment. She was arrested in August 2016. This means she was released presumably in early 2022. She was about 37 years old. Where she is now is unknown. Systemic problems. This story is not only about the cruelty of two people. This is a story about how the child protection system failed. Veronika cried out for help, literally. She told teachers about how they beat her, tied her up, humiliated her. These stories were recorded on audio and passed to guardianship authorities. Teachers saw bruises, reported twice to guardianship. Neighbors heard screams and profanity from the Chernikovs' house. The grandmother, Elena Zubareva, personally approached Olga Olenina twice with specific facts of cruel treatment. And what? Nothing. Olga Olenina was a longtime friend of Zubarova. Maybe that's precisely why she didn't want to spoil the relationship, or simply didn't believe that her acquaintances were capable of such a thing. Or was this ordinary negligence, unwillingness to make an extra trip for inspection, a formal attitude toward work? The result is 1. The girl died. 2 years suspended for negligence. Is this just punishment for a child's death? Memory of Veronika. Veronica Chernikova lived only 6 years minus 1 month. She was born on May 2nd, 2010. Her biological mother abandoned her at the maternity hospital. She was adopted when she was only 2 months old. She was an open, sociable child, developed beyond her years. She gravitated toward adults because at home she lacked normal communication. She loved candy, and for taking a piece of shashlik without permission, she was killed. Her body was never found. Her ashes were scattered across 4 settlements of the Moscow suburbs, but she is remembered. The white balloons that Ozori residents released into the sky, the toys that people still bring to the house. This is the memory of Veronika. Conclusions. This story is about how indifference kills, about how important it is not to pass by, not to remain silent when you see that a child is suffering, not to think, not my business, about how the child protection system should work, not formally, not for show, but really. Veronika Chernikova cried out for help, but no one heard her. Let this story become a lesson for all of us. Be vigilant. Protect children. Don't be indifferent. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Remember Veronika.